The night I left, I didn't scream. I didn't throw plates. I didn't even cry. I just watched him sleep, the man I had loved for 8 years, and whispered goodbye. He never even woke up, and by the time he found the note on the kitchen table, I was already hundreds of miles away. 1 year later, he showed up at my door, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes begging me for something I wasn't sure I had left to give. And if you've ever faced someone who broke you and wondered if you could look them in the eye again, stay with me. Hit like, subscribe, and let me take you back to the night it all fell apart. He didn't knock like a stranger. He knocked like someone who still believed the walls would part for him. I didn't unchain the door. I looked at him through the thin diamond of the peephole and thought about the first time I'd ever seen his face through a lens, a blurred photograph at a friend's barbecue, his profile caught mid-laugh, his hands mapping the air. There he was again, older by 1 year, drenched, shivering, and stripped of the easy certainty he wore like cologne. "Eden," he said when I opened the door an inch. "Please." My name sounded like an apology in his mouth. Rain gathered on the porch light and fell in soft, steady clicks. Behind me, the kettle restarted because I'd set it to keep warm, a small kindness that felt like betrayal. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I know," he answered, and his breath fogged the threshold. "I didn't know how else to. I needed to see you, just once, to say—" "To say what?" I asked. "Sorry? Or something you think is bigger?" He swallowed. "Both." The porch smelled like wet leaves and soil. The road behind him was empty, the hour indecent, a time built for bad decisions and confessions that arrived too late to save anyone. 5 minutes. I stepped back. "And don't drip on the rug." He laughed, but it broke in the middle. "You still care about the rug?" "I care about what I can control. Shoes." He told out of them. His socks were soaked. They made a sound like surrender when he stepped onto the wood. I caught myself watching the puddle form by the mat and stopped. It was the oldest habit between us, loving the smallest details, because the big ones could destroy you. He stood in my tiny kitchen and looked at everything as if it were a museum exhibit. My thrifted kettle, the potted basil drooping over the windowsill, the single mug I used when I didn't want to wash too. "You moved," he said, and then corrected himself. "Of course you moved." I said, "You read the note?" His eyes flinched 100 times. I poured the water, set a tea bag to bleed into the mug, and realized too late I'd chosen the blend he used to steal from me, lemon and thyme. I swapped it for peppermint, watched it bloom, and slid it toward him. He didn't touch it. 5 minutes. I lifted my chin. "Say what you came to say." He took a breath that looked like it hurt. "I chose the worst version of myself. I chose it again and again until I lost you. I'm here to ask if there's anything left to save." A drop slid from his hair onto the back of his hand. He didn't wipe it away. I remembered the way those hands used to move over blueprints, over grocery lists, over me. There's a tenderness in memory that will ruin you if you let it. There was a time I said, when I would have sold my bones to hear you admit that. But honesty isn't retroactive. It doesn't undo the night I learned your phone password by accident and wished I never had. He closed his eyes. And because the truth is a pendulum, it swung me backwards. It began so gently I almost mistook it for wind. A new cologne in the closet, late meetings with no paper trail, a second toothbrush in our guest bathroom, bristles still wet when I'd come home on noon on a Wednesday to pick up the scarf I forgot. We had a language built from small things. He would make my coffee exactly the way I liked it. 1 sugar, a pinch of salt, cream first, so it spiraled like a galaxy. I would hide notes where he'd find them. Buy more cumin. You're still my favorite argument. When we fought, we stayed long enough to land safely. When we loved, it rushed through the rooms and pressed into the walls like summer heat. But this was different. This was silence that made a shape. The night I learned his password was an accident. He bumped his phone against mine while we were ordering takeout. A tiny rectangle flashed with a code I'd watch him punch 10,000 times, never caring to memorize it because trust had made me lazy. Laughter then. His belly against my back. The smell of garlic and beer. Us debating whether Patsy U counted as comfort food. He bent to kiss my shoulder, and the phone unlocked to a screen I'd never seen. 3 messages. The preview gave me only broken halves, but halves were enough. Are you awake? I can still taste. Tomorrow. Same hotel? My tongue went numb. The room narrowed to his heartbeat against my spine and the shape of the letters I couldn't unsee. I didn't unlock his phone. I didn't have to. Cheating isn't a puzzle. It's a shadow with a man inside of it. I put the cartons on the table. I smiled through dinner. I asked about his day, and he told me. Every lie was soft and warm and harmless as steam rising off noodles. I kissed him on the mouth, and he tasted like mine. Later, I shifted in bed until there was a continent between us that could not be crossed without visas and apologies. And then I got up. I packed. Not the careful packing you do when you plan to return, but the frantic arithmetic of choosing a life with a suitcase. Passport, photo albums, the dress I kept for funerals and great beginnings, the chipped ceramic bowl my mother gave me. I left the coffee grinder and the cast iron pan we'd seasoned together because I wanted him to notice their absence and miscount what mattered. I wrote the note. My hand didn't shake. I watched him sleep. There is something cruel in saying goodbye to a person who doesn't know he's losing you. Crueler still is waking him to watch him plead and then forgiving him because tears look like truth. I didn't wake him. I left. He wrapped his hands around the mug without drinking. Rain turned the street outside into a sheet of bruised glass. My apartment felt too small for 2 people with a history this large. The kettle kept breathing steam as if it were anxious for us. I got help, he said finally. Therapy. Not the kind where I list my mistakes like a museum docent. I learned the way I turn fear into flirtation, the way I call loneliness freedom, until it's convenient to forget the difference. I learned the names of my cowardice and wanted to show you I wasn't. He shook his head. I wanted to show you, period. How many people did you show? The question surprised me with its sharpness. After me, before me. His shoulders slumped. Just her, before. Nobody after. Her name, I said, not because I wanted to know, but because I needed to hear him choose honesty in a sentence that cost him. Lena, he said. The name moved through the room and settled on the chair by the window, neat as a folded coat. I stared at it. I had never wanted to be the kind of woman who hated another woman for choosing the same wrong man, but I had also never wanted to be the kind of woman who weighed a decade against the perfume bottle and discovered the perfume won. Did you love her? I asked. I loved the person I got to be when I was with her, he said. The man with no laundry to fold, no mortgage to negotiate, no history to forgive. I loved relief. I'm learning that's not love. I let the kettle click again. It sounded like a clock agreeing with me. You're good at speeches. You always were. Remember our first fight? You wrote me an essay about dishwashers. He almost smiled. The great silverware debate of 2016. Forks, handle down, I said. Bacteria, he said, and then quieted, as if the intimacy of an old joke had worn his throat raw. You came here for forgiveness, but the only thing you're guaranteed is closure. And closure doesn't look like reconciliation. He nodded. I know. Do you? I asked. Because closure means you leave tonight with an answer you can't negotiate. Something trembled in his face and settled. Then ask me the question that decides it. The rain eased to a spill. A bus moaned somewhere far off. I could see our old kitchen with its sunlit counter and potted mint, and the ghost of me leaning against the fridge, arms crossed, listening to him explain why he hadn't been calling, why meetings ran late, why our bed felt too wide. If I forgive you, I said, what part of myself do I have to abandon to make room for you again? He didn't speak. I watched him count his words and set them down. Not the part that knows better. I'm not asking you to be softer. I'm asking you to be honest with me, the way you were honest with yourself when you left. I know what I did to your gravity. I won't ask you to pretend it didn't happen. Honesty is seductive when you've lived on a diet of half-truths. It can look like redemption. It can be another disguise. I pulled my robe tighter and we sat with the sound of rain and peppermint between us. People talk about infidelity as if it happens between two people in a sealed room, but I learned it was crowded. The waitress who saw bruises of lipstick on a collar that wasn't mine. The front desk clerk who checked him into a hotel room paid in cash. The friend who heard rumors and chose not to wound me with them. The dog that whined at the door at 3 a.m. The clock. The neighbor who waved at his car leaving our driveway half an hour after midnight. Witnesses everywhere, stitched into the fabric of an ordinary life. After I left, my sister drove 5 hours to stand in my kitchen and watch me make toast, as if the sequence mattered. Bread, heat, butter. She asked nothing. I told her everything. We didn't say his name. We said he, like a weather pattern that couldn't hear us. I'm not broken, I said into my coffee. I know. But you are different. She answered. Different looked like taking a night shift at the bookstore down the block, because readers are the kind of people who respect silence. Different looked like learning to fix the screw that kept slipping on the bathroom cabinet. Different was buying one pillow and letting the other end of the bed stay cool. When I cried, it wasn't for him. It was for the version of me who believed that love was a guarantee you could frame. I cried for the woman who thought loyalty could prevent storms. He set the untouched tea down with both hands, as if returning a relic. I sold the house, he said. I couldn't breathe in there. Every drawer had your handwriting in it. I only labeled a pantry, I said. You labeled everything, he said softly. Jars and years and fears I didn't want to name. It turns out the things I made fun of or the things that kept me real. I didn't want to feel compassion for his grief. But compassion isn't obedience. It doesn't mean I owe him anything. I paid the penalty on the mortgage, he said. I set aside your share. It's in your account. The mention of money made the air tilt. You can measure love in words. You measure apologies in actions. You measure repair in time. You didn't need to do that, I said. I did, he answered. His voice steadied. And I wrote her a letter. I told her I had used her to avoid looking at myself. I told her I was sorry for the person I became, not because I was with her, but because I lied to everyone, especially her. What did she say? She didn't respond, he said. I think that's fair. The quiet wrapped the room like cloth. I felt something loosen behind my ribs. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a thread I'd been pulling for a year, finally releasing its knot. Why now? Why tonight? Because I've spent 12 months rehearsing this apology, he said. And every time I said it to an empty room, it sounded like theater. I needed to say it to the person I broke, so you could tell me if it's real. I thought of all the places I'd practiced my own speeches, the shower, the aisle between self-help and memoir, the bench by the river where I put names on the water and watched them float away. I thought of all the ways I had repaired myself without him. You keep saying I said. Listen to yourself. I got help. I paid the penalty. I wrote the letter. What have you learned about we that isn't a trap for me? He pressed his lips together. When he spoke, the answer was small and careful. That a marriage isn't a favor one person does for the other. It's not charity and it's not rescue. It's the decision to stay every day because you both keep choosing the same horizon. I stopped choosing us long before I betrayed you. I chose convenience. I chose applause. I chose a version of me that asked for admiration instead of intimacy. If there's ever a we again, it won't be because I convinced you. It will be because you decided I'm safe to stand next to. And if you don't, I'll live with that. The truth has a texture. This one felt like sanded wood. No splinters, just grain. I held it in my hands and didn't bleed. Come with me, I said. He blinked. Where? I took his keys from the bowl by the door, old habit, new person, and handed them back to me. Drive. We moved through a city that had learned my footsteps and forgotten his. The streets were black rivers edged in gold, everything slick with the rain that had stopped but left its taste behind. Left, I said, and he obeyed as if obedience were a language he was learning late in life. We parked outside the bookstore. The sign was dark. The window display was a mosaic of paperbacks and a hand-lettered chalkboard that said, "We forgive late returns." I unlocked the door and let us in, flicking on the lamp by the register. The place smelled like glue and paper and 1,000 conversations. This is where I remembered how to be a person without you, I said. I want you to see it. He walked the aisles like a pilgrim. He touched nothing, just read the spines as if they were names of saints. What did the book say? Everything, I said, and nothing. Some nights I shelved romance and wanted to throw them all out the window. Other nights I found a sentence about the way a stranger's laugh can change your day and thought, okay, maybe I still believe. He stopped at the table where we kept the staff picks. My card was there, propped in a small wooden stand. Eden recommends. He read it and smiled, then winced, because even Joy remembered it was injured. "What am I doing here?" he asked. "Standing in the problem you created and not making it about you." I gestured to the bell over the door. When that rings in the morning, people will come in looking for stories that hold them together. You taught me how quickly a story can come apart. He nodded. "I see it." "Do you?" I asked, and I guided him to the memoir shelf. "Pick one." He reached for a spine at random and handed it to me. I didn't look at the title. I opened it to a page and read a paragraph aloud about survival that didn't use the word once. The sound of my voice filled the narrow aisle. He listened like someone learning music. "I don't trust you," I said when I closed the book. "But I don't hate you either. That feels important." He swallowed. "It is. And I don't want you to disappear," I added, surprising myself with the tenderness in it. "Disappearing is too easy. I want you to live with what you did and choose better because of it." "I can do that," he said. "You can try," I corrected. We stood in a silence that wasn't empty. There are silences you earn. This one was earned. When I told people I left without a fight, they wanted to know why I didn't stay to demand the truth. They wanted a breakdown, a police report for the heart. They wanted a woman tearing the house apart, tearing him apart, tearing herself apart for spectatorship. But the night I left, I wasn't brave or cruel. I was clear. Clarity doesn't need volume. It needs a door. I thought about my grandmother who spent 30 years waiting for my grandfather to stop drinking. She kept saying, "I kept thinking if I clutched the bird tighter, it would learn not to fly." She died with her fingers still curled. I loosened mine.
We drove back quietly, my hands on my knees, his eyes fixed on the night like he'd been issued a temporary license to be in it. At my door, he'd been asked to come in again. He stood on the same porch where he had begged to be heard and waited for me to decide if the hearing would continue. "You asked me for closure," I said. "Here's what I can give you tonight." He stood straighter, as if a verdict required good posture. "You're forgiven," I said, and his breath left him like a storm breaking. Before he could step forward, I lifted my hand. "That's not a bridge back. It's a way out of the burning building, for both of us." He nodded, pain and relief mixing in a color I didn't have a word for. "I'm not ready to try again," I said. "Maybe I won't be. Maybe never is the kindest answer. But I'm also not closing every window. Email me in 6 months. Tell me what you've built that has nothing to do with convincing me to return. Friends, a routine, a garden, a sentence you'd be proud to read aloud. If you have something to show me that looks like a life, I'll read it. If not, that will be my answer." Tears gathered, but didn't fall. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. And don't send flowers," I added, "because humor is a ladder out of grief. They die, and then I have to bury them." He laughed, short and grateful. "I remember." "Good. Remembering is the first payment on a debt like this." He looked at me one last time. I saw the man I had loved, and the man who had lied, and the man who might become someone else entirely. I saw myself, too, in the reflection of his eyes, not broken, just reassembled differently. "Good night, Eden," he said. "Good night," I answered, and closed the door. I leaned my forehead against the wood and listened to his steps down the stairs, the car door, the ignition, the sound of his leaving.
The apartment exhaled. The basil by the window lifted its sleepy leaves toward the glass, as if the rain had a song only plants can hear. I made tea. Peppermint. I drank it hot and sweet and slow. Morning brought ordinary light. I woke to the sound of the garbage truck performing its clumsy ballet, thought about taking the trash out in a robe like an apology to the neighborhood, and decided dignity could wait. I showered. I made toast. I wiped the ring of dried peppermint from the counter with the heel of my hand and smiled because it looked like a halo. At work, I told no one he'd come. I stalked new arrivals, nodded at familiar faces, and recommended a novel about a woman who moves to a city where no one knows her. A man with a beautiful dread of commitment asked if we had any books about learning to stay. I pointed him to poetry and hoped he'd find himself inside a line that didn't ask permission. Around lunch, my sister texted, "You okay?" I typed, "Yes." Real yes. She sent a confetti emoji because she was herself. On my break, I wrote a list titled, "Things that are true regardless." Basil perks up if you rotate the pot. Water tastes better cold. My sister's laugh can defuse a bomb. I like the lemon tea, but peppermint is kinder. Loving someone doesn't mean you must stand still. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you let them in. I folded the list and put it in my pocket like a talisman. That evening, I read on the couch until the words doubled, and I fell asleep with a finger between pages. I dreamed of a door I could open from both sides. 6 months is a country. I learned the names of the neighbors I'd avoided on principle. I sat on the stoop and traded weather theories with the woman who claimed the moon controlled her sourdough. I took a Saturday pottery class and made 3 bowls that looked like they were telling secrets to each other. I forgave myself for the way I used to ask love to be proof that I was good. I attended a tiny concert alone and stood in the back so the bass could rearrange my ribs. And I got a letter at exactly 181 days. It arrived in an envelope with my name written like a promise not to waste my time. No flowers, no gifts, just paper. I held it, felt the old panic, breathed, opened it. Eden. I planted tomatoes. They died. I planted them again. They survived. I learned that you can't water guilt out of the soil. You have to amend it with patience and compost and the humility to ask your neighbors why their basil thrives while yours sulks. Mrs. Grant across the hall tells me I talk to the seedlings like they're employees. I'm learning not to manage everything I love. I joined a group that picks up trash by the river on Sundays. I apologized to my brother for the way I turned every conversation into a campaign for my innocence. I called my mother and said the words she needed. I was wrong. She cried in the loud way she does and then asked if I was eating enough. I am. I still miss you, but I have stopped rehearsing speeches to win you back. If you ever want to know what my days look like now, come by the river any Sunday morning. I'll be the one with dirt under his nails and a thermos of bad coffee, listening more than I speak. No response required. Theo. I read it 3 times and then once aloud to hear where he had learned to place his breath. There are apologies that are metalwork, shiny, precise, and cold. This was a garden, messy, iterative, and alive. I didn't go to the river the next Sunday, or the one after. Instead, I stood in the mirror and practiced a face that looked like what I felt, undecided and unafraid. On the 3rd Sunday, I went.
He didn't see me at first. He was bent over, picking a tangle of plastic from the reeds, his hair tucked under a cap that had lost its allegiance to any team. The river moved with the slow authority of something that knows it will get where it's going no matter what we do to it. A dozen people in bright vests worked the bank, laughing over the grim poetry of the things they found. A single shoe,
a birthday balloon that had outlived the party, a dog toy shaped like a steak. I stood at the trailhead until my courage stopped looking like an imposter, then walked down. Gravel sang under my boots. He turned at the sound, and it was like watching a person arrive in his body all at once. He didn't drop his bag or run to me. He lifted a hand, small and precise, and then looked at the river again, as if asking its permission. "Hi," I said when I reached him. "How's the coffee?" "Terrible," he admitted. "Then, do you want some?" "Yes," I said, because bad coffee is a sacrament when offered honestly. We worked. He didn't talk unless he had something to say, and what he had to say was mostly about the way rivers teach you patience by refusing to be hurried. He introduced me to everyone as my friend Eden, 2 words I had never expected to be grateful for, and I felt my ribs soften around a new arrangement. At noon, we sat on the fallen tree and split an apple. The wind pressed the smell of green things into our clothes. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can," I answered. "When you left, did you ever think about staying?" His voice held neither accusation nor plea, only curiosity. "Every minute," I said, "and every minute I chose to leave again." He nodded like a student who has finally understood an equation he has been getting wrong for years. "I'm not ready to be married again, to you or anyone, but I am ready to see who you are becoming without making it my job to supervise it." He smiled with just his eyes. "That's more than I came here hoping for." I took a sip of awful coffee and didn't flinch. The river made its dark music, tireless, unconcerned with our categories: husband, wife, betrayer, betrayed. It only knew forward. Months later, he knocked again. This time, it was daylight, and he carried basil seedlings in a tray like a row of eager hands. "For your window. They like morning sun." I looked at the seedlings, at him, at the door, at myself. I opened it wide enough for both of us to stand in the frame without touching. We didn't rush. We didn't draft vows. We set the basil on the sill and talked about soil and light. Maybe there will be a future version of us that chooses each other again, not as a correction, but as a decision born from 2 full lives. Maybe there won't. Either way, the person I am now, the one who left without screaming and learned how to stay with herself, will be okay. If you've ever walked away without slamming the door, or faced the knock you feared and found your own voice waiting on the other side, hit like and subscribe. Not because this is my happy ending, but because it's an honest one. And if you want more stories that tell the truth even when it stings, you know where to find me.